Everything in life has an art form to it. Everything you do has an art form too. Here we discuss the art side of life. This is the Art of Arts podcast with your host, Chris Bowman.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back into another episode of the Art of Arts podcast. As always, I am your host, Chris Bowman. I'm very excited today. I got a special guest in. I cannot wait to talk to this gentleman. Our guest today is none other than Mr. Eric Osborne. Eric is a minister, a psychedelic researcher, and the founder of Psanctuary, the Sacred Mushroom Church here in Louisville, Kentucky. So excited to have him in and talk a little bit of psychedelics and his research and what they do at Sanctuary Church. So without any further ado, the man of the hour, the one and only Mr. Eric Osborne, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome in, Eric. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Chris, man, that's a wonderful intro. I'm happy to be here.
Hey, happy to have you in. I've been wanting to get you in for a little while now. I just actually started doing this podcast. Um, and you were one of the first people that I thought about when I started this podcast because I think the work that you do is tremendous, and I know that you've had numerous roadblocks on your path to starting this church, and I would love to talk to you about those and what it is that you guys do. So I gave you a brief little intro, but why don't you tell people a little bit about who you are and what you do before we get started?
Oh, I'm just a Kentucky boy that likes to explore the inner workings of the mind. Yeah, born and bred here in Kentucky. For a long time, I was extremely anti-American, and I was going to do everything I could to get out of this country. And I've traveled abroad quite a bit. Some of that mixed with my studies and interest in Rasta led to me going to Jamaica in 2003, and I went there every year for God a long time, and eventually that led to me starting psilocybin retreats in Jamaica. The first psilocybin retreats that were offered down there. I had some friends that had guest houses, and they knew I was all into mushrooms, and I'd been doing underground ceremonies and stuff for a long time. And so I'd been trying to get them some business at their guest houses for a long time. And this was like 2013. And so I started these retreats, and they didn't take off too quick because there wasn't a whole lot of media around psilocybin back then. What Michael Pollan's book came out in I think his book came out in 2018. His article in the New Yorker came out in 2016. And so that's really when the public, so to speak, even started taking psychedelics seriously again. So that bootstrapped for a while. In 2015, we were reported and arrested. That was one of the hurdles that you mentioned there. And I kept going to Jamaica even while on probation. I was smuggling mushrooms to Jamaica to run those retreats down there. Just because my life has been changed by psilocybin. I've seen it change so many people's lives, and it has just always, since my very first trip at age 19, I just was like, this is where I'm devoting my life. And at first I just was like, I thought I have always like, can I drop F-bombs on your show?
Yeah,
I figure
absolutely.
you're a comedian. I'm just always like getting fucked up. I grew up in Catholic country, and we drank every weekend. And then when I got my own apartment, we drank every night. And then I started smoking weed, and I loved cannabis. And then at 19, somebody's like, hey, try these. Or I tried some LSD first, and I was like, well, this is fucking great. And then they're like, you like this? You're going to love mushrooms. And so sure enough, I ate mushrooms. And I was like, oh, I'm home. This is where I'm back home again. And so I was thinking about it last night. It's kind of funny. It's like, this is actually the longest break well, that's not true. I had a 2-year, when I came back from Jamaica, I never took more than like a gram of mushrooms for about 2 years. And then I have done some larger doses. But since the age of 19, I have been taking psilocybin, well, religiously, you could say. And so anyway,
no pun intended.
the retreats in Jamaica, I took on some partners down there, and they really wanted to go more clinical, more kind of Michael Pollan with it. And that's just not my bag. I mean, I do consider myself a researcher informally, you know. I haven't been just taking mushrooms just to, you know, fuck around. I've been taking mushrooms to fuck around and find out. And I've wanted to know what's going on over there, you know, and I've come to several, I hesitate to say conclusions, but, you know, after 25 years of devoting your life to exploring a, a space of consciousness, then, you know, you start to gain familiarity and understand it as a landscape. And I understand it as a spiritual landscape. Um, you know, I've seen so many miracles. I have administered at minimum in Jamaica. I documented at least a flat minimum 3,000 doses of psilocybin I've administered and watched over those every one of those sessions. And the one of the kind of things that I have come up to understand is that it's all a spiritual experience. It's all spiritual healing, and we can kind of talk about what spirituality is, because it's not just like some kind of like dogmatic religious experience. You know, a spiritual experience can be like any number of things. Like some of the most challenging, painful mushroom trips that I've had have been profoundly spiritual and have brought on so much healing. So there's a lot of misconceptions. It's not something that's easy to talk about because it's a constantly moving target. You know, as soon as you think you understand the space, you get presented with something brand new. So
Well, and I think part of it too is it's hard to make blanket statements about it because it is such a personal experience for each person. What they
sure.
find on a trip is different. Me and you could take from the same batch of mushrooms. You could take mushrooms, I could take mushrooms. We could take the same exact amount on the same exact day, the same exact time, and your experience be totally separate or totally different than the experience that I have. So I think that's part of a reason that it's hard to make blanket statements when it comes to psychedelics and especially psilocybin because the mushrooms talk to each person in a separate and individual kind of way.
100%.
I became interested in your work and familiar with your work while you were in Jamaica. I was doing some research and found out about you. And funny story I'll tell real quick. I'd been following you for a couple of years on social media and following your work in Jamaica, and I had no idea that you had moved back to Kentucky. And I had produced a comedy show, and we were hanging out, a whole bunch of us hanging out after a comedy show. And I started talking to you, and I had no idea it was you. And you were telling me like, yeah, I just moved back to Kentucky, and I'm into psychedelic healing. And I was like, oh, that's funny, man. I follow this dude on social media that just moved back here from Jamaica that started this psychedelic church. And you're like, what's his name? And I'm like, Eric Osborne. And he's like, bro, that's me. And I'm like, what? No way.
I'm honestly surprised I could remember my own name that night from all the drink. That was one of the last nights I've drank ever.
I forget what show it was, but it was a really good show.
It was a good show. Who was that, man? I forgot who that was too.
It's been a few years now.
Yeah.
I don't remember who that one was.
Yeah.
Just a real quick little background too. As a teenager, young adult, I experimented with psychedelics, you know, but it was always in large doses and doing, you know, more recreational, more partying. Adult life, I got away from it. And then through years of martial arts and combat sports, I injured my neck pretty profoundly. And I suffer from a condition called occipital neuralgia. There's only really two courses of action for it. One is nerve elongation therapy, which requires 3 to 4 months of bed rest, or a cadaver nerve, um, where they take a nerve from a cadaver, replace it with your nerve, and again, that's months of bed rest. Neither of those were viable options to me. Um, I've been in the landscape industry for a long time. I'm a plant lover. That's what I did for a living. I couldn't afford 4 months without work. So I did some research and found a doctor who was using microdosing of psilocybin to treat a similar condition. Now, it wasn't treating the same condition that I have, but it was a similar condition. So I thought, what the hell, it's worth a shot. Um, so I got some psilocybin mushrooms and I started microdosing and immediately saw a decrease in the um, amount of time that my flare ups would last, and then also an increase in the time between flare ups.
Hmm.
So he was showing through his research that psilocybin could actually regrow the myelin sheath on the nerve ending, therefore allowing different receptors in the brain to communicate differently than they had. So I went from having a nerve flare up every week and a half to 2 weeks that would put me in bed for days, to now I have them maybe every 6 months.
Hmm.
And I don't even microdose anymore. I haven't microdosed in 2 years. But after a year of consistently microdosing, I mean, my nerve flare ups went from one every week to 2 weeks to one every 6 months.
Wow.
So changed my life in a dramatic way, from the medicinal side of it. It made me look at things from a different perspective when it comes to psychedelics.
Mm-hmm.
I know
Mm-hmm.
you're more on the spiritual side, but how much have you done much research into like the medicinal side? I know that
Oh
they're
yeah. Oh yeah. No, I
using
mean I
it to
got in.
treat
I'm sorry.
depression and
Mhm.
addiction and things like that. There's studies, John Hopkins
Oh yeah.
University, and some of those doing that research.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure. I mean that's the bulk of what led to our participants in Jamaica, people hearing about the Johns Hopkins research. And I mean I've worked with hundreds of people who were um, treatment resistant depression, crippling anxiety. The number of people who have told me like if the mushrooms don't work, then they have like their suicide plan was already laid out. I mean, I've been suicidal, the majority of my life, and mushrooms have just been enormously helpful for me in depression and my mental health condition. And the research shows that the more powerful the mystical experience, the longer lasting the psychological benefits. So it's like I've been studying like all my life. I've studied esoteric spirituality. Like when I got out of Catholicism at age 19, I went into Rasta and I started studying like the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Quran and like everything that was not Catholic. Not even the Bible. I went deep into the Bible and have studied and like I was listening to some Kabbalah stuff I've been studying here lately this morning, and is talking about um like it like hit so hard because this is what I've been sitting with here lately, is that every physical condition, everything that we're experiencing right now is the outcome of some non-physical event previously. So everything that we're experiencing, even us sitting here right now having a conversation, is an outcome of some metaphysical chain of events that led to this moment right now. So like we look at our current situation and we think that, well, we just got here because this is how it is, but that's not the case. It's our own, call it energy. I mean, that's what the mushrooms said to me, age 19, first mushroom trip, sitting in apartment with a bunch of buddies, all just hanging out, smoking weed, and painting and whatnot, and tripping, and just this voice just kept saying, "It's all energy, Eric. It's all energy. It's all energy." And I'm like looking around, like, what? Like all of it is energy, all of it. And so, like to understand that, really, it puts all life on a spiritual level. And I don't mean spiritual like, again, like following some religious dogma. I mean spiritual in terms of the non-material, right? Which is something that I've had to come to terms with too. It's like I'm still a very skeptical person, very practical person. I don't just believe something because I think it. Um, and having experienced, non-physical entities and orbs and all, I've seen some crazy stuff go down in these group sessions. I mean, and it has proven to me that there's another world that is enmeshed in this world, so the research is amazing. I'm so thankful for it. I'm so thankful for Michael Pollan and all the kind of pop culture stuff that's brought psychedelics to the forefront. And at the same time, it's like just the entry point, you know uh
Absolutely.
yeah.
I think that there's been a giant resurgence in psychedelics in pop culture and in society,
Hmm.
probably in the last 5 to 6
Oh,
years.
dude, mushrooms, you go into Target, you go into any store, and mushrooms are like all over the place now.
Yeah, it's now coming from like a plant background and being a plant lover, I was already pretty much, I don't want to say an amateur mycologist, but like, understanding the way that mycelium and fungi are, you know, uh, intertwined with plants, the way that
Hmm.
they use the mycelium network, the way that plants
Was
have
it
this
like
symbiotic.
95% of all plant life has some physical reliance on mycelium?
Absolutely, and there would not be life on this planet without
Hmm.
um, fungi and mycelium.
Didn't you tell me
Now,
that lion's mane played a part in your recovery as well, or am I wrong on that?
no, I did take some liamine supplements for a while. It wasn't so much for my nerve condition, but just kind of some mental clarity kind of stuff.
Okay, because it's
Um,
also supposed to be helpful in rebuilding the myelin sheathing as well.
Now it absolutely could have played more of a role in it because I was taking that at the same time.
Hmm.
So it could have been a combination of the two. Um, I don't know. Science says that it shouldn't have helped, but I'm telling you from a
Hmm.
real life world
Oh yeah,
experience,
no, I know a guy. I
it
worked with a
has.
guy. I worked with a guy who was a fighter jet pilot, and he was a retired fighter pilot. He was developing an aphasia, which is it's a neurological condition that leads to linguistic abnormalities, and they're very specific. Like wherever the aphasia is in your brain, it impacts your language in a very specific way. And his aphasia was such that he was starting to cut off the last two or three words of every sentence. So it's just involuntary. He's just talking, and he just wouldn't complete his sentences. And his wife was starting to notice, and his colleagues were starting to notice, and he was getting worried about it. He was going to a neurologist, and he said he was in the elevator one day. This guy living in Florida, he was in the elevator, and there was a retiring neurologist in the elevator with him, and they were chatting. He's like, "I, telling him what he's here for and whatnot." And he said that the neurologist told him find psilocybin, and he's like, "I didn't know what psilocybin was." He's like, and so he ended up finding out about the laws in Jamaica and psilocybin being accessible there. And then they were going to Jamaica and getting mushrooms off the beach, from sellers or whatever, and they were low quality. He came to our retreats, did a retreat with us, and I've never seen anybody have this type of reaction. And he had it consistently. He would take whatever his dose was, and he'd take some substantial doses, but let's just say he'd take 5-6 grams, and he would, within 45 minutes, he was just gone. And he would have a really, really intense trip for about an hour, and then the trip was just over. And then 4 to 6 hours later, a little bit unpredictable, but still there was a semi-predictable window of time there, he would go back into a very deep psychedelic state, and it would last for another hour or 2 hours. And so he'd have these two separate, very short, very intense trips separately from the same dose in this similar window of time. And it completely reversed his aphasia, completely removed all of the symptoms.
I can believe it. I think I'm glad to see major universities and some of these places starting to take this research more seriously.
Mhm.
I wish they would move that, change its schedule designation so that they could
Mhm.
research it more. Because I feel like there are some major benefits to a lot of people.
Oh God.
I mean, with the the current political climate and everything going on in the world, people are stressed more than ever. And I feel like just for the depression side of it, it could be huge for our society if they would
Mhm.
change the schedule.
Oh my God.
On
It's insane. I mean, just the laws around the Schedule 1, that it's not no medicinal value, highly addictive, blah blah blah, and like off the bat, psilocybin it should be excluded. So it's it's one of these things of trust the science. Well, okay, let's trust the science then. Are we going to trust the science or not? Because the science says that this is not an addictive drug. This is not a Schedule 1 substance. And it's insane. And I think, back to the spiritual aspect of it, not only, or let's say the relief from depression and anxiety would probably be an outcome of us being more connected as people, of us being more compassionate and loving to ourselves first and then to each other. Like, I mean, fuck, of course we're depressed. We're running around pissed off at everybody around us, thinking that, half the country's a Nazi and half the country's a censorist or whatever it is. And like the reality is, everybody's just trying to do the best they can to take care of their families and live a halfway productive life, So that's been the most. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, like, you're talking about the interconnectedness. And I think that's one of the things that mushrooms tells people, that when they are using them, it exposes that we are all interconnected.
Mm-hmm.
Much like the mycelium in plants are interconnected in order for them to coexist together. People are the same way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at the end of the day, we are organisms in much the same way. And I feel like the mushrooms can help connect people and make people realize that we are all interconnected. And we're all more alike than we may realize.
100%.
And I feel like that if more people tried it and more people came to that realization, as a nation and as a global society, we would be better off.
Which is arguably why they were made illegal in the 60s, right? Because it was pretty apparent that global war. And I mean, I'm not super optimistic about them becoming socially accepted widely right now either, because of that same reason. I mean, like, people aren't going to abandon their jobs or whatever, but they're going to be more loving if they start taking psilocybin, LSD, MDMA, DMT. You start taking these things more, you're going to realize that, like you said, what was the Bill Hicks thing? Like, how are they going to convince us to drop bombs on each other when we realize we're all one or something? Like, that's the truth. That's the reality. And I saw it. We see it in Psanctuary. It's one of the things that I think Psanctuary has an incredible ability to influence culturally, because so many people from so many walks of life are coming to psilocybin seeking relief, that for first and foremost, they're usually ready to put all that dumb shit aside. I mean, arguably dumb shit. Like, it does matter the direction our country goes. It does matter, like, if we stay a lawful nation or not. But there's more compassionate, peaceful ways to talk about things. We can come to better conclusions through compassionate conversation. But I've seen so many people with very differing viewpoints put all that aside and come together and talk about what's like really important, and that is the person to person connection, the person to earth connection. And then all that other stuff that is designed to disconnect us and distract us, we start to see through that and like nurture the real relationships that are right here in front of us, you know. So I am hopeful that humanity, that the collective is going to see, okay, so we were lied to about psychedelics in the 60s. Like, not just misled, not just the researchers had it wrong. We were fucking lied to. They knew unequivocally. Like, this book right here, Acid Dreams. I highly recommend this book, Acid Dreams. It's a history of LSD. Most people don't know that in the 40s, I believe it was the 40s and 50s, that there was a ton of research showing very clearly that LSD could reverse autism in children. There are children who were exceedingly autistic, nonverbal, self-harming, and they were given these kids, like 8-year-olds, like 1,000 mics of LSD, right? And then they'd like lay on the couch and drool for 4 hours, and guess what? They were better afterwards. Like, this was all documented, and it was all destroyed because, like, this is consciousness expanding. And I think it's imperialism is not about expanding consciousness.
And then it's the same thing they did with reefer madness and the
Yep.
cannabis industry, and things are finally starting to change, and people are starting to realize that there are benefits to these things. And
What do you think about how cannabis has evolved? Like, now we've finally got medical here in Kentucky, and what are your thoughts on how cannabis has evolved over years?
I'm glad to see it. I would much rather have somebody, that smoked a joint and now they're sitting on their couch rather than somebody that just drank a bottle of Jack Daniels and now they're getting in a car and they want to fight everybody. And
For sure.
it's just, I think it's a safer, I think there are definitely medicinal benefits to it. I've seen firsthand the medicinal benefits. But even just recreationally, like, I wish all 50 states would go to not only decriminalizing, but just legalizing and making recreational and medicinal marijuana legal.
Totally.
Like you said, I'm here in Louisville, Kentucky as well. We just got medicinal passed for, January 1st. It starts here, but we still got some screwy stuff going on with the backroom bills, that were added to it as well.
Who's allowed? Did you see? Like, there's only
Yeah.
in Jefferson County, there's 4 licenses permitted, and one of them is a Chinese company. You fucking kidding me?
And that's what I was going to say. Like, I would like to see it opened up a little bit more, because right now, the way that it's set up, the opportunity is not there for basically an open market. Because, like you said, there's only 4 licenses in the largest county in Kentucky.
I did grow me 4 plants in my backyard last year, though. They were big and beautiful. Oh, they were great. One of them was so big, dog.
Well, I got to ask you then, if you're into growing your own, this is off the topic of psychedelics, but do you ever use compost tea in your plant for your either cannabis or regular plants? I see you got a beautiful Monstera deliciosa behind you.
It's been a while. I've been using Fox Farm stuff. I have made and used compost teas. So I don't know if you even know this. Back in 2009, I started a mushroom farm, Magnificent Mushrooms, and I was up in southern Indiana, and grew like 15 varieties of gourmet mushrooms. That, like, I've just been involved in mushrooms, and one of the most amazing things about growing mushrooms is the incredible compost that they produce. I mean, like, I consider myself a dirt maker more than anything, and I feel like that is one of the most important things that we can do as members of society, is actually improve the quality of soil. So yeah, you're talking my language there.
Yeah, I'm into the soil sciences. I'm into, using those worm castings and the kelp and all of that I look at it as like soil is like a bank vault
Mhm.
All the nutrients you need are in there, but they can only be released in small amounts. And there's certain things you can do to your soil to allow those to come out in bigger chunks, and help be able to extract the nutrients that the plants need. So
Mhm.
soil sciences and plant sciences are something I've always been into. I'm an artist now. I've gotten away from the landscaping world, and now I'm doing tattoos and comedy full time. And
Okay.
but it's still a passion, it's still there. I still have a house full of house plants and stuff, my bonsai, all that stuff. But um, it's just funny. I do want to come back to this though. Like we just now have medicinal marijuana legal in Kentucky. How did you manage to open up this church using the sacred mushrooms in Kentucky? Kentucky's like the belt buckle of the Bible Belt here. And
Mhm.
I always kind of figured we would be the last ones on the 50 states. We would be the last ones to get any kind of legal marijuana.
Mhm.
But how did you go about like opening up your psilocybin church here in Kentucky of all places?
Mhm.
And what kind of struggles did you face from like the political side or from the government and licensing stuff in setting up Sanctuary?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, so it's one of the ironies of the conservative states is that in the efforts to use religious discrimination against particularly homosexuality, right? Like there was I don't know if you remember in Indiana back in like 2003 or something, or maybe it was in the 90s. I don't know. There was some um, cake maker up there that was refusing to serve a cake to a gay couple that was getting married, right? And caused a big stink. You can't discriminate against us, and apparently you can as long as it's a religious discrimination, you know. And so seeing that it planted a seed for me long ago. I mean, I actually started the process of starting a psychedelic church in 2015, right before we were arrested. Okay, so myself and another medical doctor up in Indiana, we had formed a church on paper called the Church of Soma. We knew that there were some ayahuasca churches and peyote churches. There was nothing for psilocybin, and we were going to try to start slowly pushing that boundary. And then, I don't know, like a month after we filed the paperwork, my farm was raided, and I had there was nothing in place for me to actually use religious defense, right? So I kind of abandoned that and put everything into Jamaica. Came back up here from the state, from Jamaica, and like when I left Jamaica, my intention was to focus on my nonprofit. I had started a nonprofit called Pledge. It stood for Psilocybin Liberation, Education, Discipline, and Guidance. It was all about scholarships for getting scholarships to low-income folks to psilocybin treatment centers, and it was really hard to get that thing going. And while we were in the process of selling our company, the attorney who was helping negotiate the sale with us, he had formed several ayahuasca churches. And this guy was in Washington, D.C., a very well known and respected psychedelic attorney. And he said, like, Eric, the world needs a psilocybin church. And like, you're the most sincere psilocybin practitioner I've ever known. I really think if anybody could create a church that could go to the Supreme Court, it would be you. And I was like, man, that's the last thing I want to do is start a church. No, not doing it. I mean, I just flat out said I'm not doing it. And then like it just like even the moment that I said no didn't feel right. So I kind of sat with it for a week, and I was like, told my wife, I was like, look, I think that I think Evan's right. I think that this is what I'm being called to do. And so we had him help us set up all the legal stuff. Now, It sounds a lot easier, and it actually is very easy to set up a church. To set up a church that's defensible in a court, much less a state or federal Supreme Court, is a very different conversation, right? To form a church in the United States, you actually don't have to file anything. You can just say, "I'm starting a church. I'm a church now. My church is called this." You don't have to say anything. You don't have to report to the IRS if you're a church. That doesn't mean that they can't come and inspect you. It doesn't mean that you're not subject to regulations and standards. But you can fly under the radar a lot longer as a self-proclaimed church. Now, but what we did was not go under the radar. Our intention was to create something to try and unify sacred mushroom practitioners around the country so that we could have a voice of solidarity, because there will need to be a court-established precedent for psilocybin as a sacrament. Right? It's historically, it's very well precedented. The oldest cave paintings known, 12,000 years old, depict psilocybin mushrooms, not just like mushrooms, fucking psilocybin mushrooms, right? With the same aliens that we're seeing when we take psilocybin mushrooms now. So, and then every culture throughout history has a documented use of psilocybin sacramentally. Like it's across the entire globe, right? So there's plenty of precedent there. But what we need to do in a modern setting, at least my belief, is that we need to create an organization that looks like, feels like, sounds like a modern church with the mushroom as the central sacrament. And that will establish this legitimacy of practice, as long as the church or churches, Psanctuary is not the only one. We're not trying to be the only one, but we do want to set a gold standard, right? Because there are a number of psilocybin churches out there that are flat out dispensaries disguised as a church, right? We are absolutely a community of spiritual practitioners who use the mushroom as the primary tool for our exploration. There's no dogma. There's no like, you're supposed to believe this. The only thing that we ask is that you are a peace-loving person who sees the mushroom as a sacrament. The way that you practice and engage with it is it's all you. It's your own personal thing. We do have group ceremonies and we do things as community and get together, but we have a pretty healthy focus on like the individual practice and then the communal engagement and communal practices as well. We have not had much pushback or any really yet from any authorities. I think in large part that has to do with how well we're put together. We have an extensive bylaws and governing documents. We have a governing body that utilizes holacracy in an attempt to, start introducing decentralization into our community. We have an extensive code of ethics, all of our trainings, and we're pretty meticulous and pretty detail oriented, and so we've set up a very well organized community that right now it's doing what we wanted it to do. It's bringing people together from around the country who are standing as a united front, professing our right for our constitutional right to use these mushrooms in our spiritual practice. And it's a peer support model where it's just people helping each other. Like that's the other thing that I came out of the psychedelic professional world disillusioned by is the number of therapists and psychedelic facilitators or experts who aren't even taking psychedelics. They don't have a fucking clue. You want to talk about what's dangerous and what's, really introducing the potential for harm into ceremonies. It's these hundreds and thousands of therapists who are administering a psychedelic medicine that they have no experiential understanding with. And anybody that's done any level of work with mushrooms knows that eventually it's going to get scary. It's going to get confusing. And you're not going to trust somebody who hasn't taken mushrooms when they tell you that you're okay. So the last thing I'll say on this, it feels really important that I really am so proud of, and I want people to understand, because there is like this, I think justifiably there is a concern about psychedelic churches in particular trying to be profit centers. And there are a number of them out there, quite frankly, that are. But what you can, the way that people can hopefully see that that's not the case with Psanctuary is that, for one, our trainings are like so much more affordable. We offer so many scholarships, and they're just so much more financially accessible in relationships to other trainings that are offered by groups who have little to no working experience with the medicines. And then that we are building this out as a peer support, so that you're not paying $1,000 for mushroom session. All of our mushroom ceremonies within Psanctuary are donation based. If you come to a ceremony and you can't pay, then cool. We also have, in Louisville alone, we have like 50 something ministers who are out there doing private ceremonies for people for no charge. So like, I know one of our ministers here in Louisville, big up Jeff. Jeff's an amazing veteran. He's been doing a lot of ceremony work with his ordination, and he has administered, I know he's held, I think he said 35 ceremonies that he's held for people with no charge. So we're getting so much medicine out there, so much healing out there for almost nothing.
Now, I'm a little more familiar with it, but for people who may not be, when you have Psanctuary here, it's an official church. You'll use psilocybin as your sacrament. What are those? Do you all have regular Sunday meetings like a normal church? Do people come to a church environment and instead of getting communion, they get mushrooms?
Mm-hmm.
Is it in person? Is it Zoom? How do you all do? If somebody is looking to get involved with the church outside of going to your website, which we'll plug in a little bit, what can someone expect if they're joining Psanctuary or would like to come check out a service? What kind of things can they expect from a service like Psanctuary?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, yeah. Well, I mean, we try to really offer a lot of different types of services and events for folks. A lot are completely free. A lot are open to the public, where you don't have to be a member and just come check out. I guess the primary primary offering would be our Sunday service, which is a Zoom service. We get anywhere from, it fluctuates, 75 to 120 people come into those services. They are what we call inspiration and integration services. So the first 30 minutes is like reading from we'll have a reading from the Tao Te Ching. We'll have a reading from some inspirational text that gets picked by members. We'll do a meditation, a little bit of journaling. And then we have about 90 minutes of discussion around either the text that was brought in and read from the Tao Te Ching, if someone has a psychedelic experience, or just a life challenge that they would like some reflection from the community from. It has been phenomenal to see how many people from around the country continue to show up to these services. And it's like another beautiful thing about this. I tell people all the time, like, this is the church that you don't have to attend, right? People see me out and like, oh, hey, I'm sorry, I haven't been to church. I'm like, I don't care. I'm not worried about that, because it's beautiful that, like, I'm thinking of a few people in Texas right off the top of my head, people I've worked with for a long time. And, they'll come in on the Sunday services for 6 months, and then they'll come to a retreat, and then we don't see them for 6 months. And that's cool, and then they come back around and they're like, oh, wow, look at all these new people, and they'll meet some new people. And so it's like a living environment, it feels like. So the Sunday services are a great way to get a virtual taste of who we are. Here in Louisville, We do have a meeting space. We actually just started meeting at maybe it's Fate. I don't know if you're familiar with that place. It's an artist collective down on Story Avenue. So it's like a co-op building, and every Wednesday we have uh, integration circles there. We're actually having an open house there next Wednesday. For anybody who wants to come, just come meet Sanctuary people. It's not gonna be one of our formal circles that we tend to do. It's just gonna be like, here's the new space that we're meeting at, mingle, get to know each other. But those circles that we have on Wednesdays are my wife or myself usually lead those, and they can be, topically based, or sometimes it's just like, kind of what's the community needing to discuss right now. We offer a ton of virtual trainings and integration sessions. Those are mainly for people who are members. And there's a lot of different offerings that either myself or my wife, or we have two other board members who will lead discussions. We have veteran circles. We have psilocybin and sobriety circles, all kinds of different virtual stuff. And then for the in-person stuff here, like, so we got an in-person community in Louisville. We have a in-person community in Columbus, Ohio, and we have an in-person community in Maine that's growing pretty quickly. We also have an in-person community in Washington State. We have people all around the country, but there are more and more places where they're starting to like collect in mass. And so in all those places, we do in-person sacrament sessions. We're planning one right now in Columbus at a Viking. There's apparently a big Viking ship that is an Airbnb. So we're all going to go take mushrooms at a big Viking ship in the spring,
Hey, you let me know. Columbus is only like 4.5 hours away.
I do. I mean,
like a good time.
Spirituality can be a lot of fun. We don't have to be all somber and dour, and even like that's the mental health community in regards to psychedelics. There's a whole lot of that there too. Like, you're suffering, you gotta dive into your suffering, you gotta suffer to heal. I'm like, maybe we've suffered enough. Maybe we can have some fun and heal that way. We actually do learn more through play than we learn through, discipline and suffering. So we do these things called celebrations. So one of our primary ceremonies we call celebrations because we're celebrating our lives and our existence together. We do believe that one of the most effective ways to overcome depression is to focus intentionally on all the things that we have to celebrate and be grateful for. And so those ceremonies are a lot of fun. What we do at those, there will usually be only one or two people that's not taking mushrooms, and then we'll have like 25 or 30 people who are all on 3 grams or lower. Those celebrations, we keep the dose, moderately low, so that people can stay present. I mean, that's another thing that I'm like, part of my skill set, part of my personal training has been to facilitate mushroom sessions while under large doses of psilocybin. And there is a ton of value there. It is absolutely a skill that can be developed. It's a workspace. Like that is my workspace. And so like there are rules and there are ways that it functions, and you can actually learn how to navigate that. And it's incredible. It's an incredible reality that most of us are not even aware exists. So that's one of the things that I like to work with.
I will say you can tell you're a veteran when you say we take a moderate dose at 3 grams. like that's how you can tell that this is a world that you're into, because 3 grams for a normal person that has never taken psychedelic mushrooms is damn near a hero dose for somebody.
Yeah, and like with those folks that we're working with, like not everybody's taking 3 grams. Like those right. Celebrations, like that's what we're trying to get people to understand, their kind of a window of mobility, if you will. So people who are lesser experienced. And then at the same time, if someone takes 3 grams and they have a big experience and they need to like whatever go into their world or deal with it, or they need some extra support, then there are people around that can provide that, you know. Yeah, no, the highest dose I've ever taken as a facilitator, and this was at the request. I had one lady, I worked with this one lady. She was a journalist, well-known journalist, an incredible human being. I've done a number of sessions with her and really developed a pretty solid relationship. And she's the only person that I have ever let dose me, right? And she wanted me to take 15 grams with her, and so I did. She took 25 grams, and I took 15, and it was a day.
Okay, listen. If you're listening to this and you are not really aware of what 15 grams and 25 grams means, let me break it down in layman's terms. That's a fucking lot. That is that is a lot. You are talking to all kinds of interdimensional beings
Oh
at
yeah.
that level. Um, that is a lot. Um, so for a typical, like, let's say you have a retreat, you will have a circle that you're doing where people are partaking in the sacrament. What kind of dosage are you all looking at those
Mm-hmm.
kind of situations? Is it up to each person? Is there a standard dosage that you all are using as a sacrament, or how does that work?
Yeah. It's usually based I'll consult with folks. I mean, some I want to say many. There are quite a few of our members who we've been working with now that I know that they know themselves well enough that they can just dose themselves, right? So there's like a number of people that I'm like, you got it figured out. You do your thing. And then if there are folks who are a little newer to it, then it's usually like I'll do a consultation with them. I kind of get an eye for it or a feel for it. I used to be like very metric, like this is a number, blah blah blah, and I've just learned to be more intuitive with it. Which like this, and most people like most people I would start out at like a 3-gram dose if they want a pretty intense experience, right? They want this is their first experience. They don't know how they're going to respond. I'll usually start them at 3 to 5 grams, depending on kind of what I'm picking up. If someone is really like needs to be in control and they're like really anxious and they're probably going to have a harder time breaking through, then I'll probably up the dose a little bit. But when we were in Jamaica, it was much more pertinent that people had a powerful experience because these are people that will be on a wait list for 6 months to come and get some therapy, and they're going to fucking kill themselves if this doesn't work. And so like there were people there that I would start them out at like 6 or 7 grams, and then they'd not have much of a dose. I'm like, all right, well, we're going to go right to 15, and then they'd have a breakthrough, and that would be really helpful for them. But that's not something that I really want to push for. What I really advocate is for people to learn their kind of typical response and then slowly push their threshold. The thing, Chris, that I have learned starting the church that I just did not anticipate at all is how incredibly transformative community is without even taking the mushrooms. A community of people who are courageously willing to address their shadow, to talk through their mental health issues, to like explore their pain and talk about it with each other and be really vulnerable with each other is almost effective as the mushrooms themselves. We have
Absolutely.
seen just the transformations that we've seen of people who come into Sanctuary before they even take mushrooms, and then they go on to take mushrooms, is like, it blows everything that we ever saw in Jamaica completely out of the water. I mean, to have the sometimes months long conversations with the community, and developing that sense of kind of security within your own self and the community and people around you, and then to go have an experience, and then to have a conscious community of support after the experience. I can all but guarantee you that the therapeutic world will eventually adopt a very similar model. We have seen it over and over. Psilocybin's great, and then 6 months later, you find yourself back in the same place. This is not like a cure-all. This is not a magic bullet, so to speak. And the crucial other component to that long-term benefit is conscientious engagement with community.
I can agree with that. Much like you, there was a period of time where I was brought up in a Southern Baptist community here in Louisville, Kentucky. Grew up Southern Baptist. Actually attended Southern Baptist Seminary for a while and
Oh,
was a
really?
registered lay speaker. And the more I learned about religion, the more it pushed me away from it. To the point where I just stopped going, kind of gave up on it, and then I started studying a lot of the esoteric stuff as well. Started getting into Buddhism and Shinto, and looking into Hinduism, and just studying all of these different philosophies and religions, and then kind of using it in the same way that I did martial arts, where take what works, leave what doesn't, and kind of develop my own spirituality based on that.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that I still do quite regularly is I go to the Drepung Gomong Monastery. Um, it is a Tibetan Buddhist temple here in Louisville, and I go for community meditation.
Hmm.
And just something about being in that room with like-minded individuals who are there for the same purpose, and then just sitting quietly in a room where no one is speaking for an hour. We're all just sitting quietly with our own thoughts, or getting rid of our own thoughts, learning to process our thoughts. There's a euphoric feeling when you leave
Mm-hmm.
a situation like that. It's an intoxicating feeling
Mm-hmm.
where you can almost feel inebriated just from sitting quietly in a room with
Mm-hmm.
you. So as someone who's done your Zoom calls, I've been on Zoom calls with these.
Oh, have you?
Um, I have. Yeah, I was actually a member for like 3 years, a really quiet one.
Okay.
Kind of stayed back. Um, but yeah, I would join the Zooms, but the meditations there were kind of the same way. So I definitely agree with that sense of community, not only in discussing it, but just being around people. There's a safe
Mm-hmm.
feeling when you're with a community of people who kind of believe the same things you are and have the same goals that you do. But I think that we need that now, because we were talking about like the interconnectedness earlier. I think we as a society kind of need that more. The problem is with those communities start becoming echo chambers.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like psilocybin keeps people from being in an echo chamber because it talks to each person individually.
Yeah, it can. It can. I think that requires like consistent consumption of psilocybin, right? It's like you see this. You see people who take mushrooms a few times and they'll have a revelatory experience, but they'll still maintain like um, some kind of political dogma or some other kind of social, dogmatic belief. Whereas if you take mushrooms long enough, you'll eventually realize it's all made up. It's all a story. And I think that's scary I've seen a number of people that get to that threshold and Even Terrence McKenna, you know, it's said that Terrence McKenna stopped taking mushrooms because he had one trip that he came out of it apparently saying it all means nothing. It all means nothing. And he never took mushrooms again. Right. People don't like to talk about that because he's the kind of cultural hero. But I think it's really important that we do discuss that because that is an experience. And it is understandably potentially terrifying to realize that this doesn't mean what we thought it did. All the stuff that we're so deeply invested in, all the whatever it is, you know, like whatever it is, there's all this stuff. Like it's all just happening. It's all just happening. Like, so anyway, there's a whole big, you know, philosophical tangent we could go down along the lines of free will and if it exists and doesn't exist, et cetera, et cetera. And that is problematic for some folks. So, you know, it's like, I'm not trying to have a community where we're pressuring people to take mushrooms at all. And I don't at all. I want people to do what they want to do. I guess that what I want to say is that for what you're saying to happen, then like we all have to continually drop our beliefs that we are right. And that's like the hardest thing. Like that's what we do is we label shit, we define things, we say this is that because of this, you know. So quantum theory and some of that science will kind of help shift perspective a little bit as well, hopefully. But it really feels like all dogma is detrimental.
I feel like as a collective, as a society, people are starting to look for more of us.
Mm-hmm.
I do feel like we're starting to turn that corner.
Mm-hmm.
People are looking for more. And I do feel like some of these psychedelics can be a good way for people to find that,
Mm-hmm.
for people to grow as a community, for people to grow as society itself. I feel like psychedelics are a good way to go about doing it.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
So I'm excited for where it's going. I know what it feels like. You know what it feels like. In a brief way, like how if you were to describe a psilocybin experience to someone who's never taken psilocybin, I think a lot of people have this image in their head. They think of like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, kind of these lizard people are there. This is bat country, you know. They have this image in their head of what a psychedelic experience on psilocybin may seem like. How would you describe a psilocybin experience to someone who's never
Mm-hmm.
experienced one? What could they expect
Mm-hmm.
from that experience?
Well, you know, you said it so well earlier how every experience for every individual is unique. And so when I have explored this over the years and, you know, having taken 500 plus doses myself, right? Like I'll come out of a mushroom session and I'll try to understand the consistencies throughout because they're always different. Like that was different. And so like what is the thing that's happening here? What is the consistent thread through all of these experiences? And this might not describe kind of the phenomenology that one might experience, but it is, I think it is the most consistent lesson, experience / requirement of taking psilocybin in particular, but any psychedelic. And that is you are going to get the most you are going to get a crash course in letting go, because you will have maybe wonderful images, wonderful memories, wonderful thoughts, sensations, or terrifying thoughts or feelings or memories or whatever. And the more we try to hold on to whatever it is, if we enjoy it, then we lose it. If we don't enjoy it, then it intensifies. And so expect to practice letting go.
I think that's a good way to put it. Um, you know, studying some of the Buddhist philosophies and going to the Buddhist temple as much as I do, non-attachment, letting
Mm-hmm.
go is a big part of that philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I find that too with psychedelics, with psilocybin. Um, exactly as you just said, you realize there are things that you have to let go of, and I think it speaks to that. In our psyche, letting go of trauma, letting go of
Mm-hmm.
preconceived notions, and just learning to be with the world.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a big part of it. Um,
Mm-hmm. Judgments,
dude,
definitions, all of it. Go ahead. Sorry.
no, because we put everything into a box, like you were talking about earlier. We label everything, we put everything into a box, and then you realize, after some psychedelic experiences, that not everything fits in the box. Not
Yeah.
everything has a label, um, and
It's
I really feel like that could be beneficial to a lot of people because we live in such a structured society.
it's
And
crucial for our survival, I think, because the compartmentalization that we have continued to double down on, right? Like it is separation, it is entropy. And what we need if we're going to survive is collective security, collectivity. There's a book that I just interviewed the author on my show. It's called Radical Wholeness. I cannot recommend this book enough, because what it does from the most fundamental to the most cosmic levels, it shows so clearly, just like how you were talking about the relationship of mycelium. Like, you can start to think about it in terms of your breath. You can start to think about it in terms of your eyesight. We are consuming light right now that came from the sun, however many long, whatever. Like, the water that we're drinking, it is all one thing. It's all one thing. And so, like, for me, one of the great tests of this is for me to, like, if I can put, and this is because I use this because it's extreme, if I can put Joe Biden and Donald Trump side by side and see them as equal in my mind and my heart, and see them as, like, this is an expression of God, right? Because, like, those two, I use that because those are just two very polarizing figures that we have at the moment, and they're not separate. Like, this is the great hilarity, and I fall into it too, right? I'm a human being, and I'm like, oh, like, well, this is wrong and this is right, and then I'm like, oh shit, nobody knows. It's all just doing what it's supposed to do, right? And so, like, it's actually hilarious. It's like U of L and UK could not exist without the other. Right, right. So it's like, you don't really want your enemy gone, because then how do you define yourself?
Yep, that's 100%. I think that's a great point. I wish more people would kind of realize that we are all interconnected and everything else is just dividing us. I wish that we could just weave together like mycelium and all communicate in some grander way so that we could, you know, move forward as a society collectively, peacefully, and just realize that we are all connected. There's that thing, the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here in Louisville, it's the biggest small city in the world. I think it's 2 degrees of separation. Everybody knows somebody, but if we extrapolate that out, we're all connected in some way in this world. And ultimately, you know, I live a life as an artist now. My whole life is trying to make people smile, make people happy. I want to bring joy. Uh, sometimes, I get accused of being a dickhead sometimes because I speak my mind. But at the end of the day, I just want to make people happy because I feel like if everybody was happier, the world would be a better
Mm-hmm.
place.
I mean,
A lot of those problems.
we talked about this a little bit that night. I know, like, I mean, I think that comedians are doing some of the most important work on this planet. I honest to God do. I think that a good comedian, and people say what they want, but like, fucking look at Joe Rogan. Look at what this guy has done. That started with comedy or what. So, um, I have a great appreciation for comedians attempt to bring people together by just making fun of all of us. Come on. Oh my God.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
so
nobody
ready.
gets a pass. If you're sitting in
Nobody
the
gets
front
a
row,
pass. No, we shouldn't. We
you're sitting in
shouldn't.
the front row and you're missing a leg. It don't matter if you're black, white, Asian, Republican, Democrat. You're getting the
Missing a
joke. Like
leg.
that. That's it. Like you're getting the joke. It doesn't matter. Um, so I feel like it's an important thing. I have a lot of comedian friends who do partake in psychedelics. They're going to be excited to learn some of this stuff. Um, I wish I could I'm nerd out sometimes talking to people about fungi and mycelium, and they're just like whatever. But there's so many cool facts. It's such a cool thing. Do you? I know that you have a psilocybin church. Mushrooms are your main sacrament. How much do you involve yourself with other psychedelics? Ayahuasca, DMT, um, salvia, whatever it may be.
Salvia. Whew. Yeah.
How do you involve yourself with any of
Oh
those
yeah.
as well?
Yeah. I love them. I love them. I mean, LSD is probably my favorite recreational psychedelic. Um, I I love a big like a 300 mic dose of LSD is a substantial dose for me, and I love it so much. I've said that psilocybin is my career and LSD is my retirement, and I mean that. I fully plan on retiring into LSD. DMT, yeah, I've smoked DMT a number of times. My most recent DMT experience was really strange. I don't know how, you know, something that like I said, I kind of mentioned this with psilocybin, and I think it's worth talking about to help normalize. We in the psychedelic community, there's a whole lot of like, oh yes, we honor the indigenous teachings and everything, and then when we start to talk about the spirit world or whatever, people are like, oh yeah, that's cute, but no, there's a fucking spirit. There is a spirit world. There's like I have had things talk to me through other people that knew my history, that knew me. Like I've just seen too many things. And my most recent DMT trip was interesting in that uh, previously, whenever I've smoked DMT, it was just kind of a experience, like you're in the DMT space or whatever. And it's still a little difficult for me to kind of speak directly to, but in recent years, I started having in mushroom trips, I started having deceased loved ones come and communicate information to me about people that I was working with. And in this instance, this DMT trip, I've never had that happen, but I had a very clear someone who passed away when I was probably 16 years old. I haven't thought about this individual for 10 years at least. And she just showed up out of nowhere in this DMT trip and told me this whole thing about my mom and this a woman that we were dating. My wife and I were dating for a while, and so that was interesting to me. I've taken ayahuasca. When I took ayahuasca, I went out to a Peaceful Mountain Way in Berea and took ayahuasca there. And ayahuasca was basically like, thanks for visiting, but you know where you belong. And so I didn't really feel like it was just like, cool, this is a neat experience, but mushrooms are really my thing. MDMA is not a classic psychedelic, even though it's being lumped in there. I have a great appreciation for MDMA and MDA. Ketamine's coming on the scene. Again, not a classic psychedelic, but a powerful therapeutic. I think ketamine's, I've seen it work wonders, and I've also seen it become habitually problematic. So I just really encourage people to be mindful with ketamine because
I
it's
think
being.
now this is totally speculative. This is just me, but I watched the inauguration. I thought Elon Musk may have been on a ketamine trip.
You know,
Listen, go back and watch.
now that you say that, I was wondering, what is this guy? What he is way too hype.
Listen, if I've seen people on ketamine,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
and looking at it, I think that Musk may have been
That's
on
not that's not a bad observation. I could see that totally being that image of Barron Trump standing beside him, like, what the fuck is this guy doing? Like,
yeah.
calm the
They
fuck
can
down.
say he may have been overstimulated, but I think it was overstimulated with ketamine, and that's just
Wow.
my opinion
Yeah,
on it. It
that
could be totally wrong.
I've seen I've seen some pretty problematic stuff come out of ketamine. Honestly, I've got one friend who's a comedian who just, and it was because of the psychedelic, propaganda, so to speak, as ketamine is being classified right along psilocybin and LSD, and I think there's a perception that it's as safe or safer because it's been clinically used, and it's not. Like the LD50 is, pretty high. You're not going to overdose, but I have seen a number of people. This one person in particular, I saw him snort ketamine, pass out. Like he's in a crowd of people just standing around, snorts ketamine, passes out, face plants onto the gravel and shit, and then just gets up and laughs it off. And I'm like, this is not what the psychedelic community needs.
Right. Yeah,
So,
I think that and even MDMA. I know there's some great research, where they're using it to treat PTSD, especially from soldiers and some things like that. But I do kind of wish that they would keep those separated.
Yeah, I do too. I completely do. And I mean, I use MDMA probably 4 times a year. Now I only encountered MDMA in 2019 was the first time I took MDMA. Again, it's I was there in Jamaica, and I'd have all these therapists come down and talk about they were psychedelic therapists. I'm like, oh, what psychedelic do you work with? Like MDMA. And I was like, huh, okay. And then I took MDMA for the first time, and I was like, everybody that's ever said they're a psychedelic therapist with MDMA is a complete grifter, because MDMA is the therapist. I mean, no, it's not to say that a good therapist can't facilitate, deeper exploration. But MDMA is just so easy to drive, and it so naturally brings up difficult things in an easy way, so but it has problematic potential as well.
Now, just in case people don't know, we were talking about ayahuasca and DMT. Those are both natural compounds. Ayahuasca made from naturally derived plants from South America. DMT is dimethyltryptamine. It is a chemical that is produced within the human body, but our brain has chemicals that kind of block it from making its way to our receptors, so that way we're not constantly in this DMT state. But DMT is a chemical that naturally is produced within our body. Um, Now we have inhibitors that stop it, but it is a natural thing, and I think that's one of the things that separates psilocybin, ayahuasca, DMT from the MDMAs, from the LSDs. is that they are natural components where the other ones have some kind of processing done to them. And I think that a lot of people, make that distinction as well. Um, and so I would like, me personally, I have no skin in the game. I'm just a fucking comedian. But I would like to see them separated when they
Yeah.
are doing research for those reasons.
Mhm.
And then you mentioned LD50, just for those that don't know, that's the lethal dose. Everything has an LD50 rating, even water has an LD50 rating. It's how much of that product it takes to kill 50% of the population that it's given to. So if they give it to 100 rats, how much of this product does it take to kill 50% of them? So everything has an LD50 rating, literally everything.
Mhm.
So just a couple points. I know what you're talking about. You know what
Right.
you're talking about, but
And
some
the
of the people listening may
safest,
not.
the safest compound, the safest mind-altering substances out there are LSD and psilocybin. Period. Now, LSD, as you said, Chris, is a synthetic. It was originally naturally derived from an ergot fungus. It is, I think it's interesting in that it is a synthetic, but it is that classic psychedelic. The thing with LSD that the reason that I'm going to wait until I'm 70 to retire into LSD is because, at least for me, LSD actually potentiates the ego, right? There is that kind of boundary dissolution, but there is also the I can do anything, right? That is very common with LSD. Psilocybin doesn't have that. Psilocybin is like you're usually gonna just sit the fuck down and like wonder what the hell is going on around you,
And laugh.
and
laugh.
and
A
laugh.
lot.
Hopefully.
A lot.
Hopefully, it depends on the individual. There's also can be some tears, lots of tears too. But yes, I love the
Maybe
mushroom
I'm
laugh.
speaking from personal experience. I take psilocybin and my face hurts for 5 days
Yeah,
because I just
that's me
laugh
too.
to the point of like I have a migraine the next day because my face muscles
Yeah,
from laughing are so tensed up.
yeah.
Um, what one more thing just on the LSD. We'll wrap this up in a minute. I know you're a busy guy. Um,
I'm loving it.
but I am so curious to see what happens. Trump has um, signed an executive order for them to release the JFK,
Mhm.
RFK, and Martin Luther King Jr. files. I am curious to see what happens when these are released because it is my understanding that at least some of these were involved with the MK Ultra
Mhm.
project, which involved people being dosed heavily with LSD.
Mhm.
So now I'm going to be genuinely curious to see how when these classified files are released to the public and they find out that, LSD was playing a part in this and Dr. Jolly with his work with the Haight Ashbury Clinic and how he was involved with Lee Harvey Oswald and all of these things.
Mhm.
What kind of hit LSD and psychedelics are going to take when this information is released to the public and they find out that the MK Ultra
Mhm.
programs were behind some of these assassinations. And again, purely speculative. I don't know. I haven't read the classified documents, but as someone who studies psychedelic research and psychedelics, and I know that in my mind, MK Ultra at least played some kind of role in those things. So I'm curious your thoughts on that, and if
Mhm.
you think there will be any kind of pushback publicly because of the LSD, and MK Ultra,
I
etc.
would be surprised if there is, honestly, because the nefarious use of LSD in MK Ultra, I feel like is pretty well known. I'm certainly in a bit of an echo chamber there. One of the anecdotal stories that I heard pretty recently, I think it was on a Joe Rogan show. I can't remember where, but apparently there is speculation that LSD is what changed JFK's mind around, I forget what invasion or what it was, if it was the Cuban Missile Crisis.
I think it was Cuba.
Was it the Cuban Missile Crisis, where they're saying that Marilyn Monroe gave LSD to JFK, and very shortly thereafter he had a kind of 180 on his views in terms of using force throughout the world, and that then his kind of shift in direction is part of what led to his assassination, that he was no longer going to go along with the war machine. I don't know. That's interesting. That would be really interesting. I mean, most of the research that was done with LSD in an attempt to control people's minds failed horribly, right? Like there's like you've probably seen the videos of the soldiers like swinging like monkeys from trees and shit. Like they give them LSD to try and make them better soldiers, and they just turn into 3-year-olds, you know. So I'd be surprised if there's much negative that comes out of that. I think it is really actually very important, though, and I'm going to, as a founder of a psychedelic church, say this, that I think it's really important that people watch out for the potential use of these substances as a way to kind of influence people for selfish means, like it was so hard. And it's like the reason my podcast is called Not Your Guru is because people just continue to think that like I know the answers, because people want a leader. And like, that's just the natural default, is for people to say, hey, tell me what to do. Right. And with psychedelics, that can be particularly dangerous. And so, it's like our myself minister program, like the entire premise behind that is for people to like really come to a center of knowing that they are their own shaman, that you're not looking for someone else to save you. We're all in this together. We can help each other, and we should help each other, but we're also ultimately on our own, so just, I would really encourage people to be watchful for that kind of cult leadership kind of stuff around psychedelic churches. It's definitely going to be a thing.
And I think that's one of the things that I respect about you, is that you don't come off that way. You don't present yourself that way. And I think that is extremely beneficial in growing this and growing your cause.
Don't follow me.
I respect that.
Don't fuck. I like.
There you go.
I fuck up all the time. And the craziest thing, like in Jamaica, I would tell my employees, like, don't put me on a pedestal. Do not. I would intentionally, even like, it's so funny. I had the incredible fortune of going on Duncan Trussell's podcast. And afterwards, he and I were sitting around talking outside, and I was talking with him about this thing. I was like, sometimes, man, honestly, like I'll smoke cigarettes and drink beer in front of my clients on the retreats, just so that like they don't get the idea that I'm whatever somehow. And he was like, man, you keep smoking those fucking cigarettes, man. You keep drinking those beers, man. You don't be anybody's guru. I was like, yes, exactly. So I should thank Duncan for the title of my podcast.
Hey, I love Duncan Trussell. He's the one that put me onto the Cacophony Society, and I would absolutely love to start a Cacophony Society here in Louisville. I just think it's great for smiles and joy. And this actually, one of his friends, Sam Tripoli, comedian Sam Tripoli, It's actually why I started this podcast. So shout out to
How
Duncan
so?
Russell, and I did a show with him, and just talking to him, hanging out for a couple nights, and he was like, "Dude, you are a really interesting person. You have a good, speaking way about you. You should absolutely have a podcast." And I was like, I don't want to be. Everybody's got a podcast. Every comedian has a podcast. I don't want to do it. And
Yep.
so we texted a few times after the shows and for the next coming weeks, and every time it was like, dude, why are you not doing the podcast yet? Like, I thought you were gonna do this podcast. So here it is. It's up and running. Shout out to Sam Tripoli for being the one that kept pushing and encouraged me to do this.
Nice.
And so it's been really fun. Been having on some really cool people. I have some more cool people coming up. I'm one of those people that, as my good friend Cleveland Jackson said, I have Forrest Gumped my way through life. So just always new experiences, always trying something new. And through that, I've met a lot of really cool people and a lot of people that I feel like have a lot to contribute. So I'm trying to use this as a way to promote them, promote their platforms, and just get some really good information out there to people. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on so bad, was so we could let people know that this is going on. There's a community here within Louisville, Kentucky, but also, globally, and where people can find some, psilocybin resources and can learn more about this. And so thank you for coming on and joining me today, so that way I could help spread the word about your movement and what you're trying to do. And real quick, this is a good point. Tell people how they can find you, and where they can find more information about Psanctuary. That is Psanctuary with a P. We're going to pull that up there real quick. Psanctuary, the Sacred Mushroom Church there. So Psanctuary with a P in front. Very clever because it's psilocybin and its spelling. But where can people find more about Psanctuary, and what platforms can they find you and your ministries on?
Yeah. So the website is .org. So sanctuary.org. We're going through a whole branding revamp. I'm super excited about our new logo and the website. It looks much, much cleaner. We've been bootstrapping this whole thing. The typical social media stuff for Psanctuary is just, all the Psanctuary on all the stuff. For me personally, I'm trying to think on TikTok and Instagram and all that stuff. It's not your guru. It's YER, not your guru, like Country Boy. And that's the name of the podcast, huh?
Because we're from Kentucky.
Kentucky,
legally.
Kentucky. That's how you have to say it. So yeah, I do all the LinkedIn. I'm on all the stuff, but I've been posting a lot less lately. I post shorts from my podcast. On my TikTok, I've been trying to get into putting up some kind of reflective stuff. I'm so confused with social media now. I don't know what I want to do. Like, what do I really want social media? And I feel like I'm usually offensive. I mean, I would 100% full transparency. If we're out to allow it, I would be diagnosed as a borderline personality. So like, I'm going to either just fucking piss you off to the extreme, or you're absolutely going to love who I am and everything that I stand for. And I don't have much of a middle ground, but like, I love people. I got people so fucking pissed off. Like I put on this face mask. I don't know if you saw this on my Facebook. Like who in their right fucking mind, what marketing team ever thought to put a black face mask in a tube? I put this shit on my face. I was like, who in their right fucking mind thought I'm going to make a black face mask? And so then, like, of course, I'm going to go say something about it online. And then, like, all of a sudden, I'm a Nazi.
I kind of saw some of the blowback from that, and I saw an X article where somebody was calling you out about it. To me, it's
Oh,
just laughable. You know, it's laughable. I've kind of met you a few times, and I know that's not you. I know that's not what you stand for, but it's absolutely hilarious that the outrage now because there's not real things to be outraged over.
no, it's
And
like,
it's like
oh,
find the things that need outrage and outrage over that. You know?
we're gonna cancel you for making fun of blackface. That's what we're gonna do.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
the podcasting, I want to ask you, like, I don't know how deep you are into podcasting yet, but what are you finding that it's doing for your personal growth?
It's making me do some more research. So, um, I'll be 100% honest. I didn't do a whole lot of research for this one, but for some of them, doing some deep diving research. This is a topic that I'm passionate about, so
Mm-hmm.
didn't have to do a lot of research.
Mm-hmm.
But making me do a little more research, and it's also helped me in my comedy writing through the course of doing this research, finding new information, and looking at it from a comedian's perspective has helped me in writing jokes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but just mostly, I want to use it as a way to promote my really kick-ass friends and
Mm-hmm.
people that I know. Um, and it's just another platform to do so. What's funny is so this is going to be essentially my fifth episode. I have a couple others already recorded that I'm going to put out after this. My very first one had a guy on. He directed a full-length feature film. He's won over 100 awards for his movies and his photography work. Tremendous dude. Huge following. The next person I had on was a local comedian, really good friend of mine, hilarious dude. Third episode was a female fighter, tremendous following on social media. And then the fourth episode was just me sitting down to bullshit with one of my friends who has no following whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And that fourth episode, just me and my friend just bullshitting, has triple the amount of views
Mm.
of the other one. And like to me, I find that humorous and also confusing.
Mm-hmm.
That was the one that resonated the most with people, and it was just us having a conversation.
It's all energy, man. It's energy.
So I'm curious to see kind of how that continues to go, and try to evolve this to where it's most relatable to most people.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I mean, I asked that because anytime you put yourself out there in the public, then you're just asking for criticism. You're asking for that mirroring, and that's such an opportunity to grow. But I suspect as a comedian, like you've been putting yourself out there pretty vulnerably for quite a while. I'm sure you've had quite a bit of criticism come your way. It's just like that. The whole blackface bullshit was like, I feel like it was the universe giving me one final opportunity to realize that somebody's always going to be offended. Like I was literally making fun of blackface. I have taught in middle school. I taught for 7 years in a 95% African American school. I went and lived in Jamaica, not for mushrooms. I was going to Jamaica for Rasta. I was like Marcus Garvey and Frederick Douglass are my personal fucking heroes. You know what I'm saying? Like John Brown. These are my lifelong like I've read Frederick Douglass's autobiography twice. Who does that? You know what I'm saying? And like, so then yeah, like I'm all of a sudden a fucking racist because I'm making fun of blackface. And like I've really been struggling with this lately because I I have a very strong desire to welcome people into Psanctuary and to create a community that is a national groundswell of advocacy for our constitutional right to work with these mushrooms. And to do that means like a lot of exposure. And I've had hit pieces written on me, like in Jamaica. There were people that like didn't think I should be doing this work because I'm not a trained therapist or whatever. And so they would, the Guardian, they would hire people to write hit pieces on me. And that stuff hurt. But honestly, honest to God, Chris, nothing hurt nearly as much as the actual friends. Like there were 2 or 3 people who were like, I thought were good friends of mine who said to me after that Facebook post, I don't want to hang out with you because of this. And like when that happened, and like it's so blatantly obvious that I'm shitting on blackface. Nobody in their right mind thinks that, like the people probably don't realize that blackface was like they made black people wear blackface. It wasn't even a white person wearing blackface thing originally. You know what I'm saying? And so like when that happened, sorry, I'm going off a little tangent here, but as that happened and I sat with it and I saw like, okay, even friends that I've had for some of them 5-10 years are not going to be able to like really look at who I am. They're going to allow some kind of judgment or critique from other people to affect their trust and knowing of me. Is like, oh, well, fucking all bets are off then. Like, I'll just go say what who gives a shit? I got my wife. My wife loves me. My kids love me. If other people, whoever, handful of people think that. So it's just been something I've been struggling with a little bit here lately. And I feel like I've kind of come to a point of, and maybe this is the thing that's going to push me into doing some stand up, because that's another thing I've wanted to do. And we talked about it that night. I've wanted to do stand up, but I'm so like, part of me is so afraid that if I go out there and make fun of the things that I want to make fun of, that like, well then fuck, everybody's going to hate me.
Listen, just come out to an open mic and try it, because if you're worried about people hating you, come to the open mic. Nobody's fucking there. There's nobody to hate you. Like, it's just other comedians hanging out trying our shitty new dick jokes. And but no, there's some really good ones, really good open mics around town. I would love to have you out sometime, and we can hang out, we can have a drink, and let you get on stage and try it. If you're ever free on Thursday nights, there's a really tremendous bar open mic on Thursdays. It'd be a really good one to come try. It's in St. Matthews at a place called Never Say Die Bar. One of the coolest venues in the city. You would absolutely love this space. I guarantee it. It's a really cool, welcoming space. Really cool local artwork everywhere, all over the walls. Everything is local artists. Really cool space, and we have an open mic there every Thursday. So if you're ever interested, come out.
What time?
That usually starts at 8 o'clock on Thursdays.
Okay.
So put your name in a bowl, and then the host draws out names, so you never know what order you're going in. You never know when you're going up. And it's a really good mic as far as like bar mics go, and not at a comedy club. It's a really good one. Obviously, comedy club open mics are always better. There's a crowd there. They've paid money. They have a vested interest in making it a good show. But bar shows are a little more wild. You're going to have all levels of experience there as far as comedians go. But it's a really good hang. I think you would enjoy the vibe of the people that are there. It would be a really good experience for you. So I'd love to get you out on a Thursday. You just let me know when you want to go.
I'm gonna take you up on it. I'm gonna take you up on it. Even if, I mean, I might, my first time, I might just go and just observe. I don't know.
Yeah, that's welcome too. We always like having audience members. It doesn't happen often, but we.
I'll probably get up there pretty quick. It's like
we got like 20 comedians and maybe 5 audience members, 10 audience members. That's the way it usually goes.
It feels like. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say it's a good time no matter what. You get more about just getting comfortable on stage. memorizing the words, figuring out what words flow
Mm-hmm.
together.
See, that's the thing. I'm pretty comfortable on stage. I like being on stage. I like talking, entertaining people. It's that pushing that edge that I really want to do, and it feels like one of the most. It feels like it would be really valuable for my personal growth, which like that's why I started with psilocybin. Like I knew, this is the thing. Is like back then in my 20s, every time I took mushrooms, every time I took LSD, the next day I would think like, I learned something. I don't know what I learned, but I'm better. I know that I'm better because of that thing that I just did last night. And of course everybody tells you you're crazy. Now we know the truth. And I feel like comedy could perform a similar function.
It definitely changed my opinion on a lot of things. It changed the way that I handle a lot of things personally. I've been doing stand-up comedy for about 8 years now. When I walked away from martial arts and MMA world, it replaced that adrenaline rush for me. The
Okay.
adrenaline rush of being on stage. Um, there's a lot of similarities that I draw between the
I was
two,
gonna ask, yeah.
but being that one person in the center of attention, like maybe I need that somewhere in my psyche.
Mm-hmm.
But the same, as being in a cage, I get the same adrenaline rush before a big packed show that I would before I stepped into a cage for a fight. To me, the butterflies are the same, the adrenaline rush is the same, and the joy on people after the performance is the same.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, that's what it's about: meeting people, having experiences, getting paid to travel. That's a big one for me because talking again about the interconnectedness. The more I travel for comedy, the more I realize every community is the same. Every community is facing the same
Mm-hmm.
problems. Every
Mm-hmm.
community has the same people. You look back at like an Andy Griffith show. Every town has an Aunt B. Every town has a Barney Fife. And it's the same. They have different names, but everything is really kind of the same.
Mm-hmm.
We put a label on it. This is Louisville. Louisville and Cincinnati aren't that different.
Mm-hmm.
Louisville and
Mm-hmm.
Lexington aren't.
Jamaica. I mean,
So
that's what I saw. And like, it's just Jamaican people. It's all, we're just people.
yeah, we're just people, and we all kind of want the same things at the end of the day. And so to me, comedy has really helped me realize that, um, made me realize and look at things from different people's perspectives instead of just my own.
Mm-hmm.
So I think comedy is good for a lot of those things, but ultimately bringing joy to people.
Mm-hmm.
Making people laugh collectively, and that's a
Mm-hmm.
tremendous feeling.
Yeah. And helping people, like one of the things I really appreciate about a comedy is that it helps people to push their edge on sensitive subjects, right? Things that we're not comfortable talking about, that are still taboo. We absolutely need places where we can just like bounce ideas off and explore things that we particularly in a lighthearted way. So that's what I want to have you on my show about. I want to have you on talk about the value of comedy.
Absolutely. I'm gonna let my son get healed up here. We got the flu A going around like the
Mm-hmm.
rest of the damn city, so I don't feel bad, but I just wanted to limit some exposure.
Yeah. I'm in no hurry.
Just to make sure. So we'll get together, and I would absolutely love to come on, and I'm gonna get you out here to an open mic one of these days, and we're gonna.
I may do it this Thursday, depending. I don't think I have anything going on this Thursday night.
Let me know. I'll plan to go too. We can go hang out, and I can introduce you to some folks, and we can just sit back and enjoy a good evening of some comedy, and let you take in the experience, and it'll be a good time.
It sounds really fun. It sounds like something I really want to do.
And that's the thing, the reason I got into stand-up comedy was there's only so many jobs where you can get paid to travel. If you're a businessman, you're selling fucking Encyclopedia Britannicas and you're traveling over. You spend your whole day working, and then you have a couple hours free, and then you go to your hotel room. You wake up the next day, you do it all over again.
Mm-hmm.
Comedy, you don't have to be there till the evening. So whatever town you're in, you have all day to go visit shops, to find a watering hole where you can go throw a line in and do some fishing and be in nature. You can eat at these small mom and pop restaurants and talk to people and get these cool stories and meet all of these interesting people and have these interesting experiences that you may not get any other way.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, that's what it's about. I've been able to meet some incredible people, hear some incredible stories, and just build that networking and just learn more about people.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's what it's all about. Bringing joy and just meeting new people and having new experiences.
I want to be able to take on a more humorous perspective generally as well. Like I can, but I can be really cynical, and there can be humor there, but I would rather develop like a compassionate humor. Like, and that doesn't mean we don't make fun of each other, right? But like everybody's fair game. I'd prefer to make fun of myself more than but like that's something that I see as a potential value if I can just like because like that's the hold up, and I don't know. Sorry, I'm not trying to go off on tangent here, but like that's when I have thought about going to the open mics. Like when I try to sit and write something, it's just never works. But like when I'm off the cuff, I've had people tell me you're funny as shit. And I'm like, well, I'm not, this is when I'm not trying. So that's where I wonder if like an open mic, if I could be one of those people that just gets up and I can just like take what's in front of me and just, have some fun with it.
Well, there's there's different kinds of writers. Like for me, I'll write down just a premise, and then I'll go on stage and just kind of freelance that premise. I don't have every word written out and memorized.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just go freelance that premise, and then I'll listen back to the tape, figure out what works better. What if I put this setup in front of this punchline?
Mm.
What if I put this joke behind that joke? Now they tie together with a nice segue. But for the initial part, like the first few times I tell a joke, I don't have every word. I may have an idea,
Mm-hmm.
and then I just get on stage and figure it out from there.
I think it's a lot like shamanism. I feel like as I've watched a good comedian, and Duncan and I even talked about this. It was very weird that I had in as a ceremony leader or a facilitator, I often said, like, I'm not your guide, I'm not your shaman, I'm just your bus driver. I'm just driving the bus. Right. And Duncan said that to me. He said that like as a comedian and as a podcaster, I'm just a bus driver. I'm just trying to like take us on a scenic route, help us learn some new things about ourselves and the world around us. And it's very similar. And so like to be able to kind of like work with the energy that's around you to take an idea or a teaching, like that's how I could perceive this. Like there's something that I want to communicate out to a larger audience. I want people to think about a subject differently. And so to kind of craft a narrative that helps to explore in a kind of a comedic way, it feels very shamanic. It feels very healing to me.
I listen after a great show when you have several hundred people that have all been laughing together for 90 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
It's similar to that meditation session that I was talking about,
Mm-hmm.
where
Mm-hmm.
again, it's a group of people who are there for the same purpose and the same goal, and they've spent their time and their money together working on this same goal,
Mm-hmm.
which is laughter and joy.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a euphoric feeling for the audience and the comedian after a good show like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think everybody should try stand up. Um, it'll either like teach you how to cut the fat, use less words, or it'll teach you that you never want to fucking do that again, or it'll give you a new appreciation for the people that can. Because once you
Mm-hmm.
get to the, you know, longer stages where you're a feature or headline, You're doing 30, 45 minutes or an hour. You know how hard it is to stand in front of an audience
Mm-hmm.
for 45 minutes to an hour and keep their attention with
Yeah.
just your words,
Oh yeah.
and so um, I think everybody should try it at least once. It'll give them a new appreciation for
Somebody
it.
like Mitch Hedberg or that does one-liners, just come out and drop in one-liners for 30 to 45 minutes. It's just like
Yeah,
that.
it's so hard. And
It
then even memorizing that.
memorize. I know. Yeah. No, I think that would be as hard as any of it. It's difficult. I love the thought. I love the idea. It feels like it just. I've told my wife this. It feels like a next step in evolution for me. So I really appreciate you continuing to kind of gently nudge me out there. I'm going to take you up on this.
All right. Well, you take me up on comedy. I'm going to take you up on eating mushrooms inside of a Viking ship. This sounds right up. I will fucking don the kilt and we will eat the mushrooms. You let me know about that one. As someone who's never tried ayahuasca or DMT,
Oh
when
yeah.
those retreats come up, you let me know as well.
I'm
Down
actually
to come
I'm
give that
working with
shot.
a DMT retreat in Jamaica, where people go down there and smoke DMT all week, but also maybe we could arrange something a little more locally too. I know some people maybe.
Yeah, sure. Say let me know. I'd be down to give that a try. Um, Eric, thanks again for coming in. I really appreciate you taking the time out of the day. I know you're a busy guy, so I appreciate you taking your time out. Any last words for everybody? Wrap this whole thing up in a nice package here, and then any last message you want to get out to everybody?
Well, I mean, this is what I enjoy. These conversations, connecting with people is really what I enjoy the most in my work. So it's not it's a pleasure to be here with you. And I guess the thing that I really try to communicate out, especially as psychedelics are becoming more normalized, but they're becoming normalized in the context of you need someone to you need a therapist to administer psychedelics to you. And I guess I want people to understand that it doesn't have to be like that. Like it's a very personal experience. You can approach it in safety with friends and community. And very often, it's the experienced friends or community that are going to help you get much more out of the experience than a traditional therapist. The therapists, I think, are really for long after the mushroom trip. Go talk to your therapist about some of the stuff that came out. But for actually doing the mushrooms, do mushrooms with people that know mushrooms.
I think that's a good point. It'll help you understand the experience that is going on.
Yeah. It's very confusing. It can be very confusing. And you want to look over and see someone who has been there before smiling back at you.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Eric Osborne, Psanctuary.org. Again, that is Psanctuary with a PPSANCTUARY, Psanctuary.org. Check him out, Not Your Guru, on social media. And a quick shout out to your wife. I know she's instrumental in the church. She does a lot of stuff. She's a teacher as well and a minister as well.
Yeah, Courtney Rose. She also has her own podcast too, interviewing members from the church that is called Sacred Spaces, Sacred Space, Sacred with a P.
Space with a P on there as well. So you guys check them out if you're in Louisville or if you're anywhere listening to this and you're interested in psilocybin as a sacrament and you're interested in the Sanctuary Church, go in there and check that out. Doing tremendous work. Definitely keep up the great work. I'll continue supporting you. We'll get together soon and check out an open mic and talk about this Viking ship.
Sounds great.
All right. Eric, thanks again, buddy. I appreciate you coming in, and we'll catch up with you next time.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris.
All right. Everybody, that was Eric Osborne from Sanctuary Church. This has been another episode of the Art of Arts podcast. Thank you guys for tuning in. Please make sure you like, share, follow all that good shit. And we'll be back soon with Stash Madison from the Wu-Tang Clan and Wu-Tang Radio, Brooklyn Republic, Protect Your Neck Clothing. So make sure you check that one out. And peace. Y'all be good.